Hello, everyone. Welcome to the DMV Business Show. I'm your host, Otto Sevilla, and today our special guest is Ron Gula. Ron is the president and co-founder of Gula Tech Adventures. Welcome
Hey
to the
Otto.
show, Ron.
Hey Otto, how's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Thank you for coming and joining us today. So before Ron Gula was the infamous cyber tech investor, I want the audience to get to know you a little better. Are you from around the area here, the local DMV area?
I actually grew up in Syracuse, New York. I served in the US Air Force, and my last tour was at the National Security Agency. So I showed up around here in the mid 90s.
Okay, wow. So you're from Syracuse, New York, and I guess you did what, all elementary school, high school, everything in Syracuse?
Yeah, it's where I went to school in upstate New York was Jamesville Elementary School, and I was in Jamesville DeWitt High School. And when it snows up there, they still go to school. So the first day I was down here at the NSA, they had a snow day, and I was kind of wondering where everybody was, why no one was going to work. I thought it was a Saturday, and they closed the base. So I'm a snow guy at the end of the day.
Okay, that's good. I'm curious, Ron, growing up, what were you into as a child? Do you remember what were sports? Was it other type of subjects you liked?
I played football. I was a lector and altar boy at church. I was into Boy Scouts. My parents kept me pretty involved. My dad was a engineer for IBM. He was a field engineer, so he would go and fix things. So I always had oscilloscopes and IBM PC Juniors and IBM PC computers growing up. And I'm kind of surrounded by a lot of my toys from my childhood. And I actually think science fiction is one of the things that got me into cybersecurity. So that's kind of was my childhood there.
Did you know growing up prior to entering college that you were going to enter in the cybersecurity field?
No, because there really wasn't any cybersecurity back then. I mean, you had science fiction books like Neuromancer, and things about future networks and that kind of stuff. But I wanted to fly. I actually got my private pilot's license. I went into Air Force ROTC. I went in for electrical engineering. And I really thought I was going to go do the whole test pilot, astronaut thing, but that didn't really work out for me.
Wow. Okay. Where'd you go to college?
I went also a New York school, Clarkson University. It's an engineering school. New York, upstate New York's got a lot of great engineering schools. Cornell, RPI, Clarkson, Syracuse, a lot of great schools up there. And I went there for electrical and computer engineering, and closer to Canada, closer to the border, and in that sort of Potsdam, Northern Adirondacks kind of part of New York State.
Do you miss the cold weather, by the way?
No, when I went to the Air Force, I went to Texas and I went to flight school, and I was in the 100-degree heat in Texas, and that for whatever reason it just took the cold weather tolerance kind of out of me. So when I have those 30-degree, 20-degree days here in Maryland, I kind of think, well, that's pretty cold stuff.
Wow.
I do like the snow though. Do like the snow.
So your preference is the warm weather then?
Oh, I like Maryland. I mean, it's
Okay.
this region has got four seasons. You got snow, you got summer, you got winter, summer, fall, spring. It's good stuff.
Ron, after you graduated college, did you immediately go to the Air Force or what happened next?
Yeah, I was in Air Force ROTC,
Okay.
and I literally had that moment where there was a limited number of pilot slots, and just one thing happened to another. I was the number two person, and the number one person had an issue, and I sort of got that. I had that Top Gun type moment where I was literally called into a meeting when the first person didn't get it, and I pretty much graduated, and I did a little bit of engineering work for United Technologies before I went active duty. But then my first thing was driving from Syracuse, New York, all the way down to Wichita Falls, Texas.
Okay. How long were you at the Air Force for?
I was in the Air Force until the mid 90s, retired. Oh my gosh, got out as a captain and did not retire. Misspoke there. But I was in flight school, and flight school didn't really work out for me. I was actually about maybe 10, 20 pounds lighter. When I pulled G's in the airplane, I just kind of blacked out. That's not a good quality to have in a fighter pilot, and it was a fighter pilot school. But I was always into computers, so I transitioned to a different career field, and I was in basically computers and communications. And after serving a couple different places in the States, wound up working what became cybersecurity at the National Security Agency.
Oh, interesting. And then that's what brought you to DC.
That's right. I literally had read a book called The Cuckoo's Egg, and which is about Cliff Stoll. And in The Cuckoo's Egg, he was tracking Russian hackers who were hopping in from system to system. And he detailed specifically who he met and spoke with at the National Security Agency. I actually found a lot of those people. I ended up going to work for those people in the mid 90s.
That must have been some interesting things you were working on there.
So in the early 90s, nobody, and I would even argue today that nobody really cares about cybersecurity, which is kind of a negative message, but I'll kind of explain that a bit more. But in the mid 90s, if you said you were a network penetration tester, people looked at you kind of funny. You know, if you said you were protecting networks from hackers, that people kind of understood that. But nobody knew what an information security engineer was, or information warfare, or computer network operations, information operations. We have all these acronyms and names to basically mean hacking into other computers and keeping people from hacking into those computers. So I got to work on some interesting things around that time, including some of the first, I'll call them nationwide, national, exercises in cybersecurity.
Wow. How long were you at the NSA for?
Oh, a couple years.
Okay.
And then, I don't want to say, when I left, you never really leave. That's kind of a standard trope, but I went to a contractor. I went to BBN and continued to do work, in that arena. And, throughout my career, the government is a huge consumer of commercial products, commercial services, and pretty much my entire career in cybersecurity, including, Tenable. I guess on that side, we had the ability to kind of work all across the DoD, including the National Security Agency.
When you transferred out of NSA to private, were you doing something similar, or did it change?
Yeah, when so NSA was very much, NSA doesn't get enough credit for the research that they do, and I really tried hard to kind of transition as captain in the Air Force to a government service employee. And it just wasn't in the cards for me. So I went to a local contractor, BBN. I say they're local. They had an office in Columbia, Maryland, and they also had their main offices up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I worked for them. Really had a fun time working at BBN. I got to do all sorts of special projects. And when I say special projects, I'm not talking about special intel projects. I got to work on quick, rapid prototyping of technologies. And I had the benefit of working with the people who basically invented the internet. I mean, when I was working at BBN, I had people who were experts in cryptography. Mudge was there. He's a pretty famous hacker. Working at DARPA, worked for Obama now, or a couple of years ago. But BBN was just full of all these people I got to learn from, and it gave me a lot of confidence to help invent new cyber technologies before it was called cyber.
Wow. And you were at BDM for a while?
A couple of years. And then I got recruited. Some of my DoD contacts had joined a commercial company called US Internetworking. And at the time, the pitch was, hey, we can host all of your applications in our data center and you can get to them over the internet and we'll do security for you. And in the late 90s, this was like brand spanking new. Like nobody wanted to host email. Gmail didn't exist back then, right? The idea of going to a SaaS application like a PeopleSoft in the cloud was brand new. So I got to go run risk mitigation for this company, which basically said I got to do vulnerability scanning and intrusion detection. I was one of the early employees. And this was like a really, really high end, the kind of stuff everybody sees now, security operations centers and, the NOC where you get to see all the things that are going on. This is the kind of stuff we were doing in the late 90s. And it was very, very exciting. And while there, I got to work with a product called ISS Real Secure and ISS Scanner. And at the time it was great, but I saw a world of networks faster than 100 megabits coming and the Linux operating system. And I thought I could do a better job, working on those in those environments.
And then that's when you branched off on your own and you started your own company?
Absolutely. I came home one day and I talked to my wife and said, hey, I've got an idea for a company. I literally think I can write this because I had confidence of doing it at BBN. I literally think we can sell this for, I think I got quoted in a Washington Journal article around DEF CON, $3,500 a pop, right? And I can remember my uncle Nick, who's no longer with us, just basically talking about that, going, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you write code and people pay you for that." But the reality is we started Network Security Wizards. We got to about 6 employees, and within 18 months of starting that company, we had what I would call site licenses at a variety of DoD places, America Online, which was a big deal back then, a couple banks, a couple intelligence agencies, and at the time, it was a forerunner of modern hunting in networks, because you could write rules to look for attacks, you could share signatures, indicators of compromise, if you will. Nobody called them these things back then. You could do your own, you could turn things off, turn things on, and it ran on Linux. And in the late 90s, if you wanted to be an information security person, building your own Linux laptop, your Linux system, that was cutting edge type stuff. But we didn't raise any venture capital, and we sold that company to Enterasys Networks.
How long from the start to when you sold it?
It's 18 months.
Wow.
And then we stayed a couple years there, and we got to learn a lot of great things about, large internet, manufacturing, manufacturing partners. We didn't understand stuff. I mean, there's no school you go to where it's like, here's everything you need to know how to build a company, right? Or how to grow $100 million company, that kind of stuff. But we got to learn a lot from Enterasys. They were a public company. They had a channel. They had partners that made money by doing services. They had international 2-tier, 3-tier support teams. So we got exposed to all this, and we were able to integrate, into that stuff. We even had our source code stolen by the Russians. At one point, the Dragon source code was stolen by, so basically there was an R&D unit. Russians came in, and I remember communicating with some of these guys online, and they were sending me the checksums of the source code that my team had written. So we learned a lot during those 2 years while we were at Enterasys. But the best thing that happened to us at Enterasys, besides learning all that, is we met Jack Huffer. Now, Jack was our co-founder at Tenable Network Security, and he was sort of on the buy team. But once we merged in, he was somebody I developed a relationship with. Every time I went up to Cambridge, went up to Andover, Massachusetts to see the management team at Enterasys, I would always stop by and talk about how Dragon was doing, what we were doing for our customers. When we started talking about starting another company after this.
Okay, and that's where sort of the seed that was planted as far as the next phase.
Yeah, one of the big problems with enterprise security is that you have so many ways to measure risk. You have vulnerability scanners, you have asset things, you have different scanners for different types of technology. So in the early 2000s, you might have had a scanner for Windows, a scanner for your Cisco router, a scanner for your phone system, and tying all these things together was going to be a problem. This is what the idea we were kicking around in the early 2000s, and we decided that we had a good partnership with Renaud Darrison, the guy that wrote Nessus, which is at the time was an open source vulnerability scanner. But the three of us founded the company. We founded Tenable, and we started making a product not only for consultants to use, but for large enterprises and managed security providers to run and scan hundreds of thousands of nodes at the same time.
Wow. Ron, let me ask you this. Before you started your first startup, you were an employee for the longest time, and then you founded the first company and the second and so on. What would you say that comes to mind, some of the things you learned from that first time when you founded a company compared to before as being an employee?
So we got to work, I say we, but I'll talk about my wife in a second, but I got to work with a lot of different management styles, right? I got to see lieutenant colonels, full-bird colonels, generals. I got to go to college and see professors talk about different types of things. I got to work for some amazing engineering managers who kind of taught me different ways of looking at things. And while I was going, I didn't realize it, but I was making mental notes of what I liked, what I didn't like. I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. This sucks to be on this side of this conversation. I want to avoid this. Or, wow, that's really cool. They'll walk into a room and say, deliver this kind of news. So I was able to catalog a lot of those things. And that really kind of gives you some DNA to talk about what does success look like? What do things look like? So, the other thing to share with your viewers is that there's no secret to business. if you can make money by supporting customers and giving them something that they like, that's all you need to really focus on. Now you can read all the books about how to optimize this or optimize your leadership, or try to set goals and be more efficient, and that's all style and detail. But if you think you can do a company where you're going to go and deliver maybe a service or a product, people should all try it. It really makes your life a lot more interesting, and it can really make the lives of people around you even more interesting.
I agree. And, some people may say, well, Ron, I have responsibilities and it's a little bit scary if sort of go off the ledge and start my own company. And I'm sure those are thoughts that you had as well when you founded the first one, right?
So this is one of those things where if you're going to take a risk, you can then get the reward of that risk. And then the question is, if you get that reward, are you willing to risk that again? Are you willing to double down? So I have some amazing friends who are very entrepreneurial, but they had an entrepreneurial career inside the National Security Agency. So for example, the CEO of Trinity Cyber over in Crofton, Maryland, one of our portfolio companies, Steve Ryan, amazing career inside the NSA. He can talk about very, very little things of what he's doing, but he was an entrepreneur the whole time. Now, does he get the benefit of risking? Well, the nation gets the benefit, but as an individual, he can't really talk about it and do those kind of things. So now he's, trying to do something for the nation with Trinity Cyber. My point is, there's plenty of people who they get comfortable where they're at. Maybe they're making a difference and they're comfortable and they're not sort of doubling down. So if you're a mentor for one person, why aren't you a mentor for 10 people, right? If you are, if you're whatever you're doing, you could do more. And the question is what is everybody's capacity to go there? So it's the same thing for risk. If you're making money consulting and for the government, maybe you could go consult for a corporation and impact even more of the country. Maybe if you're a consultant, you can leverage your knowledge and put that know-how into a product. And if you can do a product, well, maybe you can then grow a company that can do hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue someday and employ thousands of people. It's definitely sort of I don't want to say it's a food chain or there's a hierarchy there, but there's always something more you can do as an entrepreneur or a leader. So the question is, what is everybody's risk tolerance and appetite to do that?
That's true. So you founded the second company going back there, right? With you said two other founders?
Yes. So it was Jack Huppert and Renaud Darrison. First employee was my wife, Cindy. And we were conscious to avoid the husband and wife view, even like 10 years after, when we were out doing our big Series B, Series C fundraise there. I got questions. Oh, you guys are a mom and pop shop. And I was like, where is this coming from? Right. Cindy wasn't even on the website at that point and stuff, but one of our competitors was kind of going around saying that. So, but yes, we founded the company. We were, before anybody knew it, we had $50 million in the bank and didn't raise any significant venture capital. So the first time we raised venture capital, it was a record-setting event, not only for Maryland, but like the East Coast. It was a $50 million investment from Excel Partners. And then we followed that up with a more than $300 million kind of investment from Excel and Insight Partners. And, so we had grown the company to more than $100 million in revenue. There was a year where I cut a cake celebrating not only 300 employees, but 400 employees in the same year. And it was that kind of growth is really interesting. And there's so many people I'd have to thank, going down that road. The list is long. A lot of them are still at the company, but it was really, really a fun time. And it was such a fun time. A lot of what we're doing now with investing is trying to help recreate that. I'd like to think we could help create maybe another 10 Tenables in this region.
What made you, do you remember as far as any pivotal points during that period of growth that sort of just skyrocketed the company?
So there's, at the end of the day, Tenable is a compliance and visibility company. We're going to give people a view into something that we call now the cyber exposure. So all of your digital assets, all your computers, all the vulnerabilities with that. Now, what you do with that information is up to you. But because of that, anytime there was a major attack. So if you look at SolarWinds now that's in the news and you go back over the last 10, 15 years, we've had a lot of those. We've had WannaCry, we've had NotPetya, we've had, things that don't hit the news that might be a big deal for the US military or maybe the banking industry. There was a while where Iran was doing denial of services attacks on the financial infrastructure. We also had, a lot of pivotal moments where Tenable won site license contracts with the DoD and being a major vendor for DHS. So if you look at folks like the CISA in the news, where Chris Krebs used to work, that organization is sort of like the cyber organization of DHS. They work pretty closely with Tenable, and they use them to do a lot of the vulnerability audits and security testing for the civilian US government. So all along the way, we had those major types of successes where we could, not only have a media event, but we could use it to recruit people and use it to invest in the company.
That's great. What made you decide at the end, Ron, to sort of shift from that and maybe go into the investment side of things?
So when we got towards the end, when you're running a $100 million plus, company on its way to IPO, it's pretty easy to see that, your horizon's 3 years, 4 years, 5 years out. Literally, if you drive through Columbia and you see the Tenable headquarters next to Meriwether, which you can see off of 29 for your viewers in this region here. They're just getting into that building now. That was something I signed off on before I even left. So there was things like that going on. Our office in Ireland, for example, I've never been to it. If you're downtown Ireland, oh my gosh, I forget which. I had never even been there, right? So we actually have the Tenable building, in Ireland.
In Dublin?
I've never been to it. Dublin, exactly. But my point is you're looking so far, and I'm seeing this public company coming, and I'm going, that's pretty cool. But I kind of want to do more what I'm doing now, investing in companies, really trying to attract more people to this industry. We're going to talk about data care, I hope, where we can talk about how I think cybersecurity needs to be expanded. You can't do that as much when you're focused on a company like that's public, and you have to deliver 100% of what you're telling the market. Otherwise, your stock price gets cut in half. Now you get more resources when you go public, but it just wasn't in the cards for me. I did not want to do that. What I'm doing now is very, very much what I've always envisioned. Anybody who knows me says I've always talked about doing a venture fund, a foundation, and really trying to work with that next generation.
I'm glad you mentioned the next generation, and I see your career, Ron, and starting from the Air Force, and I'm sure it was great you were able to then accomplish and get some government clearance there. But if, let's say, a young person, maybe in their teens or 20s, and they wanted to get in that cyber security industry, well, what can you suggest to them or advise them for them to do?
So the cyber industry has done a very, very poor job of painting that picture, right? If we were having a conversation about law, about healthcare, about being an architect, being a pilot, there's so many ways to get it. And every guidance counselor, every TV show, every book kind of has it right. It's nobody gets a nurse wrong or a paralegal assistant. And, with cyber, we completely have communicated incorrectly to the general public. So, the first thing I want to tell people is that everybody is needed. It doesn't matter if you're math or I get questions a lot like, what programming languages should I learn? I'm like, I have a lot of people who are programmers at Tenable. They don't consider themselves cyber people. At the same time, we had a lot of accountants too. And, the accountants would every now and then tell us, I love working in the cyber industry, because they were helping build a company. So my message to people is like, if you want to do cybersecurity stuff where you're protecting the confidentiality, the integrity, or the availability of your data, you have to be somewhat, technical. Doesn't mean you have to program, but you have to understand IT technology, cloud technology, mobile technology. You don't have to understand all of it. You can start out just being a mobile security expert. You can start out being a firewall expert. You can start out being a router wireless expert. The point is that anything you learn that you like, that's your foothold. That's no difference than getting your like a nursing degree or getting your bio degree and then wanting to go be a doctor. You don't have to be the equivalent of a cyber brain surgeon to get into this industry, and that's a big lie that the cyber industry has told you. It says, look, your minimum to get in is to be certified and to have like a 4-year degree. That's totally the furthest from the truth. There's so much information out there for people to learn. it's almost overwhelming. So pick something, find a job, get in the system, and then at that point, you're going to have a great career.
That's good to hear. I was recently having a conversation with someone who I think majored in cyber, but they were more in the IT related field, and they were talking about they wanted to get into cyber, and he was telling me how difficult it was just due to not having government clearance. And I don't know if that was factual or what. I'm like, I'm sure there has to be ways to get your foot in the door.
So in this region with the DMV, there is a huge need for cleared IT people and cybersecurity people to work for our sensitive government customers, right? We have a couple intelligence agencies here. You can't just walk in and work on the Hubble Space Telescope IT systems, right? You need a background check, and those things take time. And so you should, if people want to get into cyber in this region, you should make it easy for yourself, right? Like hopefully you're not going to have drugs on your record, or social media posts where you're posting things about presidents, or anything like that. I mean, that's going to make it harder. Having said that, though, there are a lot of things that people can do to get in the industry quicker. You can get certified. You can go to places like Cybrary, and for a couple $100, you can actually take a course, get trained, and then take a class and get a certification in any number of things. So there's CISPA, there's ISC squared, there's a bunch of other certifications that you can do. If you're in a perhaps less privileged, if you're in a low economic situation, there are so many organizations in this area that will help teach you. There's NPower, there's Year Up, there's a number of different nonprofits out there that are focused on that. We have a foundation that just funded a couple of them, including the Black Cybersecurity Association, which is based here in the DMV kind of area. And almost every conference, I think it's going to take a few more years for the cybersecurity industry to really embrace this stuff. But most cybersecurity conferences have tracks for folks who are new. They'll hook you up with mentors on speaking, making sure you get the most out of this thing. So the industry is really pivoting to being more accepting of everybody. But I think we still have a ways to go.
That's good. That's great. I'm glad you mentioned this. I'm going to have to tell him he has to listen to this episode.
Very good.
What would you say drives you and motivates you?
So a lot of what we're doing right now, and the we here is my wife, Cindy Gula, and I mean, we're pretty much dedicating our lives to the cybersecurity industry at this point. This is all we do. We invest in cybersecurity companies. We try to communicate the message of cybersecurity to the general public, which is one of the reasons we're doing the show here to reach your audience. And we're really trying to create an opportunity for nonprofits to go to the next level. We have a foundation that targets nonprofits that are focused on cybersecurity. We do a competitive grant process for the Gula Tech Foundation, which is our focus there. The previous grant that we did earlier this year was focused on increasing African-American awareness and engagement in cybersecurity. And then just this past Monday, we launched a new grant process that focuses on nonprofits that are increasing cybersecurity awareness in the general public.
That's great. Wow. So you're very busy with the nonprofit arm as well.
It's about 2/3 of a commercial portfolio. We got about 30 companies and actual cybersecurity funds that we work with, including in this region right here. We got Interloop Capital, we've got C5. And then on the nonprofit side, we're really trying to make sure that the nonprofits that we're helping fund are continuing to succeed and get exposure. For example, so the Black Cybersecurity Association, NPower, and Girl Security were the 3 finalists, 3 winners of our January grant. They've all had interviews with the RSA conference, which is one of the largest cybersecurity conferences in the world, let alone the country. They've been covered in SC Magazine, which is good. We had NPower on our own podcast, our own show called Gula Tech Cyberfiction. And we're really just trying to do more to get them introduced to corporations and strategic cyber influencers.
That's great. Ron, you've accomplished so much in your business career. Is there anything that comes to mind that you're most proud of?
I just, a lot of folks that worked with us have gone on to do bigger and better things. And there's just so many people. And the thing is, everybody's next level is a little bit different, right? So some people are just happy to pay off a house, pay off a student education, and we're very proud about that. But what in particular, what I really like is when we work with somebody and they now have a career. When we did Dragon, we had people who were doing network engineering at Enterasys Networks who are now at FireEye, at Palo Alto, at some of these most amazing cybersecurity companies that are out there. We've also had people from Tenable go on into even bigger careers, become chief information security officers, become founders of their own companies. That cycle of innovation, that cycle of entrepreneurship is something that is really, really important to us. And we're seeing it play out right here in the DMV region.
Are they any specific traits or skills that you feel that have helped you personally throughout your career?
But trying to be truthful and communicate the same way all the time. And this is something I tell a lot of my portfolio companies. This is really hard for people to do. What do you do for a day job? What does your company do? What problem do you solve? I will see somebody answer the media or an analyst completely different than an investor and completely different than an employee. And that's tough. If you're not saying the same thing consistently to all your constituents, you're going to have a harder time. It's going to take you longer to say the same thing. And it's really hard for technical people to kind of know when to have that line of when am I saying too much or too little. And it takes some coaching. It takes some, well, maybe that didn't go. It takes some experience delivering those kind of messages. But that's something that's one of the things I credit to that. And then I'm just going to throw this out. You would be surprised how many folks get into trouble because they risk stretching the truth. I'm not going to say they're business is tough. You can't, when's the product going to ship? It's going to ship next month. Okay, well, what happens if it ships in 2 months? What's it going to cost? What if you're completely wrong when you're telling this? So knowing when you said too much or too little and when you have to go back and manage expectations without losing credibility, that's such a hard thing to do when you're growing a company that might be thousands of people big.
Oh, that's great advice. You mentioned you have about a 30 plus portfolio in your company?
Correct.
Okay.
If we list them at gula.tech, so the website's www.gula.tech. We list our foundation winners and we list our portfolio companies that we work there. There's some great ones in the region if you want me to maybe talk about them a bit.
Yeah, definitely, please, especially if they're local here from the DMV.
Very cool. So on the Maryland side, we've got Trinity Cyber. Trinity is a company that basically puts security in your internet connectivity. So if you have a 1 gig connection to the internet and you're struggling with patching systems and protecting yourself, literally Trinity can kind of clean those pipes, if you will. Similarly, Inky is based in College Park, Maryland. They are an anti-phishing, anti-spam, anti-business email compromise company. They use AI to block all that. And if you want to get training, I think I mentioned Cybrary before. Cybrary is in that same College Park region as well. They've had about 3 million people. They've been able to bring about 3 million people into the cybersecurity industry by getting certified. In Arlington, we've got a couple companies there. One of them is Scythe. Scythe is an interesting company because to your readers or to your viewers, this is a very interesting type of cybersecurity awareness that can be done here. So we don't really have in the industry a good definition of what is security. What does it mean to be done? Are you compliant? Do you detect things? One of the theories is if you can detect malware, something like SolarWinds, in a minute, maybe make sure it's not a false positive in 10 minutes, or you can get rid of it in 60 minutes. How do you even do that? So Scythe basically makes implants that are benign, but as sophisticated as stuff like SolarWinds or what the Chinese are doing. And they allow any organization to basically see how good their defenses are. And it's fun stuff. So those are just a couple of the ones in the region.
Now that you mentioned them, how do you find your investments?
So it's interesting. We're blessed enough, my wife and I, that we can, work at many different levels of the cycle. So let's say you and I, we're going to go start a company. We have to pay for our salaries. We don't need $100 million day one, right? We need maybe some salaries, maybe a little bit of runway to buy stuff. So you're going to raise maybe $500,000, maybe $1 million, that kind of thing. So we worked a lot early on with seed investing. And then we sort of moved up a bit as we learned a lot. And we said, let's do Series A. Series A, where you're going to raise millions of dollars, maybe 3 million, maybe 10 million. Series B, you're going to raise a bit more. So we basically developed a reputation that, we're easy to work with, where we provide a lot of operational expertise. We can sort of be something called an independent investor. in that, we're not financially working for our investors. We're just investing money that Ron and Cindy Gula made. We're not raising money from, other financial institutions. So we're very operator focused. We're very founder focused. And we do a lot of shows like this. We've done probably over the last 4 or 5 years, I think we've done like 200, 300 different either public speaking or podcasts like this. And now, of course, we're doing our Gula Tech Cyberfiction show. So a lot of that brings us, interest. And then another way is that we actually invested in other funds. So when you invest in other funds, you kind of get to see their deal flow and see what they like and what they don't like. So we have a very unique, coming out of Tenable, we have a very unique view of the cybersecurity sort of startup and investing market.
That's interesting. So it's all your funds. There is really no investor money.
Technically correct.
Okay. Okay. That's great. What would you say has been the greatest investment lesson you've learned, and any particular deal or investment you've made thus far?
Well, the biggest one is Tenable. When you start a company and you own those shares and you can go all the way to taking it public, that is the best return on your time. It's simply the best return. So I talk to people who want to start companies and they want to invest. I'm like, that's great. You want to invest. If you start a company and that money you were going to invest in some other company, if you actually start a company of value, you're going to get more return on that than anything else. And, I think the biggest thing I've learned out of that is to ask founders to think about what success looks like, because you could make a company with $1 million in revenue. You might get acquired for 20, 30, 40, $50 million. I mean, this is like, it's not the kind of things people consider that this market is doing. But I across my portfolio, I have multiple companies right now who are in the $100 million, $200 million valuation range. And I've only been working with them about 3, 4, or 5 years. So if you think about the life of an entrepreneur and a startup person, it's very easy to create value. At the same time, knowing what failure looks like is interesting as well. I mean, there's a lot of companies I've worked with where they can't get past $1 million. They can't, and maybe it's because of the market, maybe it's because there's too much competition. And that's, how do you deal with that is just as important as how you deal with success. One of my funds we work with is Forge Point Capital, and one of the gentlemen who runs that is Don Dixon. He always says he doesn't like to leave any wounded on the battlefield, right? So all business is combat in some ways. At the same time, if you have an asset that's maybe the CEO, something happened to him or her, maybe the market turned and nobody wanted to buy Betamax when everybody's buying DVDs. Those things happen. How you handle that is just as important to your reputation and what those entrepreneurs are going to do next.
And most of your investments are only in the cyber tech field, correct?
So we do have a couple outside of cyber that,
okay.
I kind of say that a couple of them are like artificial intelligence. We have another Maryland company called Retrium, which if you're programming and you practice the agile process, one of the things you need to do is basically talk to the other developers and say, is this stuff still working? Should we change it? Every 2 weeks, you're supposed to meet and do that. So they do that. Now, to me, coding, AI, computer vision is all cybersecurity. We do have a few non-cyber investments in the region. We're working with a movie company in Baltimore because I'm a big science fiction fan, but that's really a guilty pleasure more than, actually it's a great investment, but it's certainly not cybersecurity.
That's good. Are most of your investments, Ron, is it pre-seed, seed, series A, B?
We're all over.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and that's like when I say we're full spectrum, we look at seed, we look at series A, series B, and a lot of what we're doing, I mean, you sort of, like, let's say you were raising $10 and then I had another opportunity where a company was raising, $3 million. Well, I might put $10 into your company and $3 million and work on them both equally as hard. Now,
Sure.
That's because I love cybersecurity and I'm pretty much dedicating, our lives to doing things cyber. But the reality is, at the end of the day, the one we put a couple $1 million into, probably have to pay a little bit more attention to that one.
What advice would you give someone who wanted to start and work in the venture investing world?
So if you want to be a venture investor, you have to really decide, 2 things. One, are you going to raise money from other people and then invest it? And if you're going to do that, why you? So if you can answer those questions, that's phenomenal. Maybe you got to get some experience, maybe get an MBA. Maybe you have to become an operator and you know how to grow companies, and not only are you going to raise money, but then give it to other people and manage that. That's one. Now, if you're lucky enough that you have come into some capital and you want to invest, that's great. But then the question is why would somebody take money from you? Because there's plenty of people who will take money from a family office, and there's some very sophisticated family offices out there. But if you're doing cybersecurity and you have a rich uncle who's, I don't know, a dentist or a lawyer, they might be able to give you some really good business advice, but they're not really credible in the cybersecurity arena. You can still make money doing that. I have plenty of companies where I look at the cap table, all the list of all the investors, and I'll look at this and that. Oh, that's a real estate person in the region. Oh, they met this at a Rotary Club event, and it takes a village, right? It's really interesting seeing what's there. So you can invest your own money, or you can raise money and invest it. You got to figure out which one and why.
I have a feeling I know the answer to this, but you personally, why you decide not to, go to the family offers or raise investor capital out there?
Well, we communicate with those folks. So the way I decided is, Cindy and I are lucky enough to be able to write a check and make a decision. Do we want to put more money in? Do we not want to work with these people? But let's say we're in a situation where you've created a great company and you got to $1 million in revenue, and you have an opportunity right now to sell your company for, let's just call it $50 million. And our $1 million investments is worth $5 million. Nobody's going to be angry if we go, yeah, let's all do this, right? But now if that money, that $1 million I invested in you, I got from other people, that's only a 5x return to them. And it's a little bit less once you pay like our fees and stuff like that. They might be angry. They might have been, why didn't you go a little bit longer? Because if you got to 10 million, maybe it would have been $700 million and it would have been a little bit more money. Mm-hmm. So we don't have to have that conversation with our investors. And so we're very founder friendly, and we're, if we put $1 in and we convert it to $2, we're amazing investors. If you ask me to invest that money for you though, and that's all I did, you can get better rates with other folks. So that just makes it a little bit easier for the Gulas and a little bit easier for the people we invest in. But at some point you have these real decisions of what does success look like. And if you don't know what that success looks like, then it's hard to recognize it when it knocks on your door.
That's true. What would you say is your biggest challenge right now, Ron, with your role at Gula Tech Adventures?
It's trying to say no, because we're pretty involved with anybody who, tries to reach out, whether it's politicians, folks in the government that we know, folks in the nonprofit region. Like this particular week alone, we're doing a lot of public speaking. My wife spoke yesterday. We're both speaking to the Naval Academy later this week. We're doing a couple keynotes. This is a busy week. And so it's hard to scale, but we're really focused on trying to bring this message of data care to anybody who's not in the cybersecurity, sort of industry. If the typical non-cyber person doesn't really understand their responsibility in this case, and they certainly don't understand the career opportunities in cyber, and data care is a message that we're really hoping to steal from the healthcare industry and bring this to the general public.
You want to share a little bit more about data care?
Thank you. Yes. So right now, if you can try this yourself, if you go to a dentist, a car dealership, any stereotypical business that's not known for cybersecurity, and say, hey, do you have cybersecurity? I guarantee you that person's going to say, I don't know. We have a firewall. Larry in IT.
Yeah, IT guy.
It's not a responsibility. Then if you say, how do you care for my data? They will instantly change. Oh, that's different, but there's really no difference. And then the same thing, if you pitch cybersecurity to a young student or a minority, a young woman, and you're trying to say, hey, do you want to go into cybersecurity? Well, one, we've pitched cybersecurity so incorrectly. We don't have it on TV and the movies correctly. And it's a bunch of white dudes at the end of the day, right? So if you're a minority, there's not a lot of inspiration to go hang out with a bunch of white dudes. If you have to overcome whether it's real or perceived racism or sexism, that's tough. But if you say data care, if you say, hey, have you considered a career in the data industry, data care, there's a lot of stuff going on now with data analytics, with just IT and cloud. And cybersecurity is really kind of perceived as like, I'm chasing hackers. I got to fight China. I got to go get a government clearance. Yeah, in some cases, yes, but 90% of the time, no. Not only can you get a good job with a certification and make 40, 50, 80K a year as an entry level non-college person, so that's what data care is all about. It's all about raising awareness and responsibility about cybersecurity in the general public, because we've done such a poor job calling it cybersecurity.
I love this. So DataCare, is this an organization you're involved with?
So everything at Gula Tech is all Gula Gula. We don't own DataCare. We're hoping people kind of steal it. We are putting a lot more effort into it. We got a couple videos up there. We got a short blog that talks about these things. I've seen some people kind of take DataCare and use it to teach about social responsibility with social media, like Facebook, you're the product. It's not, that's why it's free, that sort of thing. That's great. I've seen some guidance counselors and career counselors take it and use it to talk about the different types of cybersecurity jobs that are out there. Because like I said, they were all teaching, if you want to go into cybersecurity, you need to be a programmer. That's the furthest thing from the truth. I mean, some of my best cybersecurity people I know are management people and people who are accountants and believe it or not, some music majors, right? So if you're technical and if you're technical and you can understand art and understand complex things, you can do cybersecurity.
Ron, you were just mentioning earlier how this is a busy week for you and your wife. I'm curious, your team at Gula Tech Adventures, is it just you and her, or how does that look like?
Right now, it's Cindy and myself. We are considering adding some more people. We've been very sort of purposeful about enabling other people. Almost everybody who's ever come and says, "Hey, I want to work with the Gulas," I've hooked them up with one of our portfolio companies, one of our nonprofits, one of our venture capital firms. Rather than doing our own fund, for example, we invest in other funds. A great example is I've got a great working relationships out of Baltimore with Justin Label from Interloop Capital. Justin, in a different universe, maybe we would have started a fund together, or maybe one of the other funds we would have joined. But we really wanted to kind of do more than just investing, and be able to speak on policy, be able to do things like this to educate the market, and also do nonprofits and do cyber investing. So it's a different kind of cut for some people because we are so broad. But we are probably going to be hiring some folks and bringing folks into the Gula family pretty soon.
Yeah, I can't believe you and your wife by yourself are doing this. You must be very, very busy.
It's all we do. We're dedicated to cyber. Cyber's done really well for the Gulas. We're definitely trying to give back, and that's pretty much what we're focused on. And I kind of think anybody who's thinking about giving back to the community, again, what does that success look like? And it's like, well, for us, it's pretty straightforward, right? We want to create more entrepreneurs and get a good return on our investment and create some tech. We want to bring more people into the cybersecurity industry. And, if we do both of those things, the nation's going to be a lot better off when it comes to dealing not only with things like elections and fighting Chinese intellectual property theft and keeping the Russian espionage out of our systems. It'll be a lot better if we get all that done.
Ron, what do you know now that you wish you would have known at the start of your career?
That's a tough question. I sometimes I talk about, maybe the journey at Tenable, we could have shortened a couple years. We had a couple flat years. We had a couple, we were slow to replace people, quick to hire people. Maybe we could have been quicker to kind of make changes. I don't have a whole lot of regrets though. So it's kind of hard to say where we're at now, what I would have done different. There's always more people we could have done more things for. And I don't really I try to focus on the future and not the past.
Sure. Coming to a conclusion here, are they any mentors you've had in the past? And if so, what did you learn from them?
So there's a couple. At the NSA, I worked with some amazing folks who talked about cybersecurity at different levels. There was a woman named Becky Bass. She has since passed, but she really kind of framed all of what they call the graybeards. Like literally, most of them were men, so they had graybeards, and they're the wizards who kind of started internet security. When I got out, I got to work for BBN, and again, there are people who invented the internet. People like J.F. Mergen. They kind of just how the internet worked, how DNS works, that kind of stuff. And then when I got to Tenable, I really listened to all my co-founders. I have so much respect for my wife, for Jack Hufford, for Renaud Darrison. But then we brought some interesting people in. Wow, Steve Vince is the current serving chief finance officer. The way he looked at finance and just preparing the company was really amazing. And then we had an advisor, not an advisor, he was our board chair, Michael Capellas. He really, the first time I met him, I just knew I was going to listen to him. And then now I'm lucky enough to have so many people who've been there and done that. Like I said, Don Dixon at ForgePoint. You got Tom Noonan. So I mentioned a couple times ISS Real Secure and Scanner. He was the CEO of that company that inspired me to get into cybersecurity and do the Dragon. And he's now the chief operator or the CEO of Tech Operators. So I get to interact with him, on a semi-weekly basis. So it's very interesting to know when to listen to people and have the opportunity to ask questions. So I'm definitely blessed with a lot of good friends and good advice out there.
That's great. What does the future look like? What's the next 5 years or so for you and for Gula Tech Adventures?
Yeah, so I think 5 years from now, if we were going to do this again, I think data care is going to be a real thing. And we're always going to have cybersecurity, don't get me wrong, but I think data care will be a real thing. People are going to talk about that going into it. We'll be better off as a country because I think we're going to be starting to not only do more spending on cybersecurity, hunting and hygiene, that type of stuff, but actual real security engineering. And we'll be better off as a nation 5 years from now. And I think, some of the companies that we're investing in, I'm humble enough to think that they're going to make a difference in protecting the country. So that's if we're chatting again 5 years from now, that's what I'd like to be talking about.
That's great. If people want to know more about you, what you're working on, Ron, what's the best way they can reach out to you or learn more about you and everything else?
So they can search Gula, Gula Tech, and they're going to come up with a whole bunch of blogs that we have at the Gula Tech website. We've got about 11 shows that we've published on YouTube and Vimeo and Buzzsprout and all that kind of stuff. So we've interviewed the heads of NASA. We got Tom Bossert, who's at Trinity Cyber, former DHS advisor for President Trump. We've had the cast of MacGyver on these shows, the CBS reboot. So if you just Google this stuff, it's good. And that's where people can go and find us. We're all over.
That's great. Ron, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Otto, thanks very much. And hello again to everybody in the DMV region.
I appreciate it. Take care.